Here we are at the Thronateeska Heritage Center, and there's also a planetarium here. Now on exhibit is Drugs, Cost and Consequences. It's a traveling DEA exhibit, so that should be interesting. This area is pretty historic, and the brick road here is original from 1918, and we have some remnants of train tracks here that you can see. Very historical down here. Now driving through the town, it was interesting. There are a lot of abandoned buildings, abandoned businesses, and if you recall the news of a couple years ago, this area was hit quite hard early on in the pandemic. And yeah, so here's a also interesting, there's a Georgia Museum of Surveying and Mapping, which I have an interest in as a former CAD draft person. And I did other CAD work, but I guess it would fall under drafting engineering. But yeah, let's take a look inside the museum. Okay, we made it in the museum. I'm not going to film the whole thing, but here we are. Drugs, Cost and Consequences is the name of this exhibit that is traveling. It's here until September, and when you come in, make sure to say hi to Phyllis Broom. She's a dear, and she was kind enough to answer a lot of questions about the town in general and the exhibit, and she's a delight and full of information, so ask her anything. She's very knowledgeable. Let's go. This is very striking. This is a good reason not to do drugs. It shows the progression of meth use. So tragic. She was such a beautiful girl. So far, this is the grossest thing on display. Looks like some condoms that were pulled from somewhere, perhaps. Really gross. And interestingly, they talk about there's a little thing way down here at the bottom talking about drugs for money and drugs for weapons, and then they have this big weapon here. But interestingly, no mention of the Iran-Contra scandal during the Reagan era. So, because and of course, this is always just funny. So what stood out most here was thalidomide. Do they really still sell that? I didn't even think they made that anymore. Interesting. Now, I kind of have a problem with this. This is probably the best thing until you read on about their proposed, handling of how we can break the cycle. And for them, of course, it's in their best interest to investigate, arrest, prosecute, imprison drug traffickers, as well as seizing their assets. But probably, I'm guessing mental health care would be a better way. And I'm curious, has anyone had success with any of these problems? Solutions, prescriptions to help with addiction. Now this is a good thing. They have signs all over that say drug misuse resources. And then you come back here and they have a whole panel regarding mental health and substance abuse conditions affect us all. And underage drinking, drug use, suicide prevention, and prevention works. Everyone has a role in prevention. Everyone has a role in prevention. And then it has QR codes that if you're dealing with anything specifically, that you can use that to get more information to take with you and get help or pass it on to a friend and loved one. So there was a little bit about Albany. So it was called the Artesian City. This was 150 years ago, and it was known for its artesian wells, built in 1881, John Porter Fort. And so it was a free-flowing artesian well, and people came from all around. Then this building that we're in now was designed after the prairie style of architecture popularized by Frank Lloyd Wright. And it was called Union Station here. It was completed in 1913 and then closed in 1971. And then now is the building we're in. There was a terrible tornado in 1940 that killed 30 people, and 60 buildings were damaged. Then in 1994, there was a tropical storm Alberto. Dropped 24 inches of rain over South Georgia, flooding the Flint River, the Kinchafuchni Creek, and the Muckalee Creek, I believe is the pronunciation of the Kinchafunki. And the waters created 43 feet at Albany, and it was dubbed the flood of the century. We passed this house on the way in. I'm going to try and film it at another time. It is a gorgeous house, and it's odd seeing the water that high there, especially because it's kind of far from the river. And ending this tour, there are plenty of pamphlets if you're for the taking. And anything from K2 spice and bath salts to inhalants, other stuff, family checkups, things for youth prevention, calendar, planning guide, fact book, looks like posters, and yeah. Very good. So again, this exhibit is here until September. The planetarium is closed while this exhibit is done. While this exhibit is here, they're moving some things around, and they've moved stuff over to the mapping museum. And so the mapping museum isn't 100% right now either, because it's housing some things that were normally here. And so the planetarium will reopen hopefully in September, so it'll be worth us coming back down for another trip. And the spending on drugs versus large food giants, you can see the difference here. And yeah. So all those products with sugar in them are less profitable, I guess. I don't know. Maybe. What are your thoughts here? And just outside the museum, you also have the Flint River Trails. They have general rules for this. It looks like it's 3.6 miles at least. Up here, there's a nice little map. We're at Zero, the starting center, and it's 0.2 miles down to the Riverwalk. And they have existing trails, future trails, and yeah. So we're gonna go down, have some lunch in a minute, but I'll finish this video up. I was looking at this little hole over here. This little hole here is about the shape of Georgia. Not quite, but almost, till you get close up to it. Wow. Very cool. I love this old architecture. And so far, what I've seen of the town of Albany, it reminds me a lot of Savannah. Quite a bit. So, alrighty. We'll see you later. Hope you enjoyed this video.